Right-hand corner there, it says capacity 41. That's the maximum capacity, the rated capacity by the fire marshal for the number of people who are ever supposed to be in that room. According to Homeland Security inspectors, at that moment, there were 88 men being held in that room with a maximum capacity of 41. Some of them, quote, signaling prolonged detention to Inspector General staff. That photo taken on June 12th, 2019. You see the sign there, help. Some of them, quote, signaling prolonged detention to Inspector General staff. That photo taken on June 12th, 2019. You see the sign there, help, 40 days. Quote, in these overcrowded conditions, Border Patrol was unable to meet its own standards. Although agency standards require Border Patrol to make a reasonable effort to provide a shower for adults after 72 hours, most single adults hadn't had a shower in Border Patrol custody, despite several being held as long as a month. At some facilities, Border Patrol was giving detainees wet wipes to maintain personal hygiene. Most adult detainees were wearing the clothes they arrived in days, weeks, and even up to a month prior. Further, although standards require agents to remain cognizant of detainees' religious and other dietary restrictions, many single adults had been receiving only bologna sandwiches. Some detainees on this diet were becoming constipated and required medical attention. Kids and these men and the standing room only cells with people pleading for help and banging on the glass and saying they've been held in conditions like this for 40 days, please help. At that same facility, at that Fort Brown station, again, right in the middle of that normal American neighborhood in Brownsville, Texas, Inspector General also posted this photo of women, you see there on the left, and again there in a cell, you can see the capacity on the door. That's an overcapacity cell. You see the woman there at the front wearing an infection control mask, pressing her hands up against the glass, the women holding their hands up to try to communicate with, to try to plead to the inspectors. On the right, that's another cell, that one designed specifically for women, but it's holding adult men. That cell, again, capacity 41. The Inspector General says when they took that picture, there were 71 adult males in that room. You see one man there holding his hands up the glass as if he's praying. At that facility in Brownsville, and at another one about an hour west in McAllen, Texas, the Homeland Security Department's Inspector General says single adults were held in standing room only conditions for a week. Some single adults held for more than a month in cells that were turning up at these facilities now and describing what they saw. And at least in some cases, refusing to hand over their phones so they could, despite the insistence from the agency, actually this crowded, literally not enough room to sit down, let alone lie down, standing room only. These are more images that the Inspector General included in its report today, specifically from the Border Patrol facility in McAllen, Texas. These are the conditions in which they're holding families. Again, these aren't people who've been convicted of any crime. They're being held by the federal government in conditions that the U.S. government didn't used to get itself into, at least for this duration, because they didn't have the same kind of policies about holding on to people indefinitely. I mean, you can see these aren't facilities that are designed to hold people for any length of time at all. This is a pen, basically, a concrete floor, and they're holding people in conditions just like this for weeks and months at a time. The Inspector General's office has blurred out a lot of the faces in these pictures, but as you can see, this includes little kids being held in these conditions, including in one of those photos where they've got the Mylar blankets that kind of look like aluminum foil, and possibly one and maybe both of those images. It's a little hard to tell. We tried to get higher resolution photos from the Department of Homeland Security. They wouldn't give us anything at a higher resolution. But in those photos, as you can see, it looks like those kids may be being held on their own, away from adults, away from their families. But again, at this resolution, it is hard to see.
No, it isn't.
There's another facility where the inspectors dropped in unannounced. This is Weslaco, Texas, which I think is the way you say it, Weslaco. It's in between McAllen and Brownsville. And again, this is in the middle of a normal American neighborhood. This facility is right next door to an Olive Garden and a Longhorn Steakhouse. And there's a Lowe's Home Improvement right there on the same side of the street. It's next to the local police station. It's across the street from a Super 8 motel. And these are the conditions inside that facility in America. And this is not like a waiting room, an overcrowded waiting room where people are parked for an hour or two before they are processed and moved on. This isn't a waiting area. This is housing. This is the living conditions as provided by the U.S. government. as provided on an indefinite basis, for days, for weeks, for more than a month, even for these little kids. It's not like this is a room where they hang out and then they go to the room where they sleep. This is it. Legally, the US government cannot detain kids specifically longer than 72 hours before it needs to move them out somewhere else. But in this case, it's just holding on to them. The Inspector General says even in these 5 facilities, they found hundreds of kids being held beyond that legal limit. According to the Inspector General, quote, children at 3 of the 5 Border Patrol facilities we visited had no access to showers. At the facilities, children had limited access to a change of clothes. Border Patrol had few spare clothes and no laundry facilities. 2 facilities had not provided children access to hot meals until the week we arrived. And again, this is the agency's own report on its own behavior, right? This is the Inspector General from the Homeland Security Department. And for the second time in a month, they have put out a report like this. This is a management alert, second one in a month, specifically about dangerous overcrowding and prolonged and inappropriate detention facilities, detention conditions. Those conditions identified in May and now identified again as a serious issue that requires immediate attention. Quote, while our prior management alert identified similar issues with respect to single adults, this alert highlights additional concerns with respect to unaccompanied children and families being detained in the facilities we visited. Quote, we remain concerned that Homeland Security is not taking sufficient measures to address prolonged detention in Border Patrol custody.